things do work out, like even when you don't have a clear plan, I think being open to what is in front of you. Sometimes I think in today's world, it's so easy to plan and that we lose that serendipity of life. You're going to go to a bar one night and who's this random person you're going to meet? It could be someone really important in your life. You and I met at a meditation meeting, you and I both happened to share that interest and became really good friends. You're my wedding, we've become close friends for so many years, but who knows, right? Unless you do it, unless you show up. And I'm a strong believer in showing up, like in life, and but not just show up, but show up with like everything you've got. Don't half-ass showing up. I have a mantra that I use like in a gratitude journal saying like, I want to create magic in every interaction. That's how I've approached it for many years now. And I think that's really what you try to do. Like, don't just show up with people, but give them everything you've got. Like the Gita says, you can't be attached to the fruits of that, but you can be attached to what you do and to give all you can. And that's how I live my life. And honestly, I've been lucky to meet a lot of really great people along the way.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to From Crisis to Justice. I'm your host, Parag Amin, and I'm joined by a very special guest and friend, Pankaj Raval. Pankaj is an entrepreneur and lawyer. He started his own law firm called Carbon Law Group. He's driven by his desire to see his clients develop world-class businesses, and he focuses on serving entrepreneurs in small to medium-sized companies. Industries he serves with his law firm include technology, e-commerce, influencers, professional and retail services, and healthcare. Welcome, Pankaj. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Parag. Thank you for that very nice introduction.
So what made you get into the space of starting your own business and starting your own law firm in the first place? Is this something that you had always envisioned for yourself, or was this out of necessity? What happened?
That's a great question. Yeah. What is the genesis story of kind of where, what brought me to today? I would say, I would like to say it's planned out, but it really wasn't. I went to law school started in 2006 and graduated in 2009 at the bottom of the market. I think you were a few years later, but you were 2010 or no, when did you graduate? 11.
Just years later.
Yeah, a couple of years later. So, 2009 was one of the worst times to graduate from law school, I think, in history. And, in law school, they tell you, oh, you got to go to big law. That's the goal, big law or a big firm, that's like the promised land. And what they don't tell you is that, they grade on a curve and only a certain amount of people are going to get those opportunities. Only a certain amount of people are going to get those jobs. And even those people who did get those jobs that year actually got, asked to not work for a year or two. They actually, a lot of them lost their offers or said, hey, we'll actually pay you something, less, but don't come this year to work because of how bad the market was. So, it was a tough time, but I ended up finding a job with a friend of mine, dad, who was a pretty prominent lawyer in Arizona. He was very well known, like kind of securities litigator. And because I was on partly because I was on the team with his son for so many years and I've known him, he's like, yeah, come work for us. He was just starting a new firm at that time. And that gave me my first opportunity, kind of allowed me to cut my teeth and get experience with a lot of different areas of law, securities litigation, employment litigation, a variety of things. And I realized like, that's not really what I want to do. And then so after that first year, I realized, I want to be in California. I'd worked at MTV in law school. And I said, okay, I want to come back to California. I love the beach. I love, LA. I love everything about it. So I motivated me to the California bar right after the Arizona bar, luckily passed the California bar and ended up moving out to California, I decided to pack up my Jeep one day and told my bosses that, hey, you know what, like I appreciate all the opportunities you've given me, and but I want to try it out in LA. And immediately I remember one partner was like, this is the stupidest thing you could do. Like, what are you doing? Like, do you know how many lawyers there are in LA? What do you think you're going to do out there in the worst market in history? Like, what do you think is going to happen? I said, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know what's going to happen if I stay here. And I knew that I wouldn't be happy, and I wanted a bigger pond. I wanted a bigger ocean to swim in, and LA was that. And I had two cousins in LA, and came out, crashed on my cousin's couch for about 2 weeks. She was nice enough to allow me to stay there, and then eventually found a place. and found a job. Actually through networking, meeting people, I actually found a job out here with an entertainment lawyer. So that was my first kind of job here, contracting for them. Did that for about a year, and I realized, I wasn't getting the experience I wanted, wasn't getting the mentoring I wanted. So then I kind of looked at other opportunities. I ended up deciding to go out on my own, and that was probably 2012 or so, 2011, 2012. And definitely did not feel prepared. Did not know what I was doing. Definitely had a lot of imposter syndrome, and realistically, I probably was being an imposter because I had no idea what was going on. And but I knew that I loved to learn. I knew I was willing to learn. I remember in my first job, even in Tucson, I ended up buying it's like a CLE subscription on my own dollar. And the guy who I bought it from, he's like, I don't know anyone who's ever done this, who buys it on their own dollar to learn, the law and to continue the learning. I said, yeah, because obviously I still have a lot to learn. In law school, they don't teach you anything about being a lawyer, really. They teach you how to analyze cases, but they don't teach you about, to actually be a lawyer, what that takes. So I ended up just continuing to learn a lot, hone my skills. Eventually, networking a lot in LA, and through meeting different people, got a few clients, and then I ended up touring for Office Space one day, and I met another lawyer there, and him and I ended up working together. Him and I kind of hit it off, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I need some help," and I actually helped build his website. And he didn't know anything about marketing, so I used those skills, my design skills, to help him. And then he taught me bankruptcy and real estate law. Worked with him for a while, and then went out on my own and built my firm up again, meeting some other people. And I met these lawyers at random places, like meditation retreats, and randomly out at networking events. So that's how I kind of built the community here in LA. And through a lot of nights of going out, meeting people, which is what I enjoy. Even you and I met in meditation, in a meditation meeting, right? I think just kind of the serendipitous meeting of all these different people based on what your interests are, brought me together with great people. And now, 15 years later, I'm able to, build have a great firm and be really proud of what we've done and who we've been able to help. But it was all kind of serendipitous too. It's all just big. I think it's just about putting yourself out there and being willing to kind of be rejected, to feel like, maybe you don't belong, and to kind of sit with that discomfort. I think, it can really get you a long way.
Yeah, I love that. So it's very interesting. You talked about moving out here, and it kind of seemed serendipitous that you ran into these people, but it also seemed intentional to some extent. So can you talk a little bit about that in terms of how important is intention versus wandering when you're trying to find your way, whether it's starting a business or choosing a life or career path? Do you have any thoughts on that? Because, for example, I don't know if you've seen Forrest Gump, but
Yeah.
have you seen Forrest Gump?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's the feather. So for those of you who haven't seen Forrest Gump, there's a feather that's a theme throughout the whole movie, and there's a feather that the wind blows here and there, and it kind of just wanders through life, and somehow Forrest Gump, and then that feather is supposed to be a metaphor for Forrest Gump's life, and that the wind somehow always takes him to the perfect place, and everything just works out. He invests in some fruit company, as he calls it, and it turns out to be Apple, and he doesn't have to worry about money anymore. And so there's that idea of everything just kind of works itself out without any kind of intention. It's just the wind blowing that feather, versus also trying to intentionally seek out some kind of meaningful experiences or connections along the way to make that progress. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. It's a great point. It's a great insight. I think, when you talk about wander, there's a quote that comes to my mind saying, not all who wander are lost. And I really like that, just because we're wandering, maybe because to others, we may not seem like we have a path in life. I think it's important to have a little bit of, of compassion for ourselves, and also giving ourselves that ability to wander without feeling, oh, we have to know always where we're going, because sometimes you have to trust the path. And I think that's really true in life. You have to trust the path. And even when the path is not always clear, I know that was it for me. And I think that kind of dates back to even earlier in my life, where after undergrad, I went to India for a year and did a year in India, kind of in a program similar to Peace Corps called Indie Corps. And everyone, a lot of my relatives, my family was like, well, what are you doing? Go get a job, go get married. That's the path. That's the path everyone knows. Why don't you go do that? And I said, I felt a calling to go to India to learn more about myself and to help people, to serve. And I said, what other time in my life am I going to have this opportunity to do this without any kind of strings, without any real major responsibilities? I was so fortunate that I was able to have that time. I said I got into law school, and I deferred my admission a year, and I said I'm doing this. And even when I didn't get accepted to the program I was banking on, IndyCorps said, "Oh, we don't have a project for you specifically." And I said, "I'm coming. I'm coming anyways." And I think that was just because I knew so much that that's what I wanted to do, and I felt like I felt very, very lucky to have that clarity that this is what I want to do. It's going to happen no matter what. And I did it. And I didn't have a real clear plan when I got to India. I have family there, so I spent some time with them, and then went to Ahmedabad and worked with IndyCorps. They actually brought me on to work on their staff. I got to do the whole orientation with all the other fellows, became really good friends with everyone, all the fellows there, and then went on to other, worked on other projects from there just through meeting people. So that things do work out, even when you don't have a clear plan, I think being open to what is in front of you sometimes I think in today's world, it's so easy to plan and that we lose that serendipity of life, of what are, who is this, you're going to go to a bar one night and who's this random person you're going to meet? It could be, someone really important in your life, you and I met at a meditation meeting, you and I both happened to share that interest and became really good friends. You're my wedding, we've become close friends for so many years, but who knows, right? Unless you do it, unless you show up. And I'm a strong believer in showing up, in life, and but not just show up, but show up with everything you've got. Don't half-ass showing up. I have a mantra that I use in a gratitude journal saying I want to create magic in every interaction. And that's how I've approached it for many years now. And I think that's really what you try to do. Don't just show up with people, but give them everything you've got and then see what happens. Right. And like the Gita says, you can't be attached to the fruits of that. But you can be attached to what you do and to give all you can. And that's how I live my life. And honestly, it's been, I've been lucky to, meet a lot of really great people along the way.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree with that. There's an aspect of falling in love with the work, falling in love with the stuff that you're doing and chasing that makes things meaningful. So I've been asked the question, as I'm sure you have, as I'm sure many of the listeners have at some point, or pondered it, of what's the meaning to life? And I think inherently there really isn't one. And that's the beauty of it. It's not depressing, but in fact, it's the opposite. It's beautiful because ultimately the meaning for life is whatever meaning you choose to assign to it. So I think there's some aspect of being of service to others, helping others, and helping others find their own path. And on that journey, you find your own path. And that is ultimately what brings meaning. And that could be different avenues for different people. One of the avenues you've chosen is being of service to entrepreneurs and helping them. So what are some of the common pitfalls that come in for entrepreneurs that if they had just known this, that they could have avoided a huge lawsuit or have avoided losing their company to their partner or have avoided a very expensive partner dispute?
Yeah. Oh man, so there's so many. I think you and I deal with this all the time, right? I mean, you and I, it's cool because you and I deal with it from different angles, right? I think the problem, and from my perspective as a transactional lawyer, I kind of help clients when they're getting started, when they're thinking about, okay, partnership agreements, operating agreements, for example, like with an LLC, if you have an LLC and there's more than one of you, if you have a partner or three, I think it gets exponentially more important to have an operating agreement as you have more partners. So, because just the challenges that the issues that could arise or just go up exponentially, because not only is like okay, one partner you guys have a dispute, but now there's like, if you have two other partners, now there's like so many more permeations of potential issues that could arise. So I think having a great operating agreement, a partnership agreement, just something in place that can help really understand, okay, what are your goals? And and if you're not sure, like, oh, operating agreements are complicated, I agree, like some of them are unnecessarily complicated, but like fundamentally, like, what are you trying to do? What are your goals? What's each person going to do? What are the responsibilities? What happens if it doesn't work out? How are you going to unwind it? uh, those are like kind of the basic questions that I think everyone needs to be answering and thinking about, and writing down before they go into any venture. Because once you're in, yes, problems arise if you're not making money, but honestly, I've seen more problems arise when you do make a lot of money. I've seen that's where the big disputes are happening. Is that, okay, well, it did really really well, and I had a client they're in the healthcare space. They're in litigation today. 2 years later, they've probably spent $700,000 each on litigation because they didn't have these agreements in place. We drafted a great operating agreement, but one of the partners refused to sign it because he was doing very shady things. He was doing very shady things that the other partner was not on board with. But unfortunately, this guy's true colors came about once they started making money. Then he started hiring family. He started doing all these things that are generally a no go. And yeah, it's hard because what do you do in those people with those situations with people who are just inherently, like, I think, untruthful or inherently corrupt in some ways. They take these actions, but I think having good contracts, having a good lawyer like you to hold people accountable is really really important, because otherwise people can kind of roll roughshod over people, and that's why we have the law to protect those interests.
Yeah, absolutely. So one, if you have a partner or partners, get an operating agreement, get them to sign it. Certainly, talk through the issues and the problems. And
Right.
what can you say about the intellectual property aspects of things? When does it make sense to try to protect a trademark or a copyright, or is somebody doing it too early? Like they don't even really have a business yet and they're spending all this time and money on legal, or is it truly ever too early to spend time and money on legal?
Yeah. No, it was a great question. I think, obviously we are somewhat, partial because of what we do, but I think honestly, and even then, because like I think like you, we always treat our client as like, okay, if this is my business, what would I do, right? And you and I have our own businesses. You're in real estate. I have other startups that I work on, and I kind of treat it the same way. So I would never tell a client to do something that I wouldn't do personally. And I mean, I invest in trademarks, I invest in copyrights early on, because patents, if you have some invention, because it serves two purposes. One is it gives you the rights, but also make sure that you're not infringing on someone else's rights. So that's really important. Both those elements: protect your rights, and create some asset for you that you can actually monetize, that you can scale, that you can do something with in the future. I mean, the value in licensing is amazing. Like, especially with a trademark or a copyright. Disney did $60 billion in licensing alone last year. 60 billion. Like, I went to a licensing expo in Vegas, and you just see all these things people are doing because they've been able to build brands and build really cool worlds that now can be licensed. And it's a big business, and I think it's only going to get bigger as we as technology grows, and the world ahead. So if you have kind of creative ideas, building really cool, like, IP is going to be super valuable in the years ahead. Look at Marvel. Look at all these comics. Those are IP, but their value grew exponentially in the last 10 years because of licensing. So I would say do it soon, do it early, get it cleared. I mean, just today I had someone who came to me, got a cease and desist letter because they didn't register the trademark, and someone else registered the same name, and they said, hey, that person sent them an email or a letter saying, hey, stop using this name because we have a trademark to it. Little does this person know that their trademark rights are not as strong as they think, because my client used the name earlier. So if you're an earlier user, then actually you have rights over even someone with a trademark. But again, this person didn't have a lawyer who was a trademark lawyer. He had a lawyer. I looked him up, was like a real estate lawyer, or just did something like something else and sent the letter. But then when you hire actually someone who knows what they're doing, you're like realize, oh wait, they actually have a lot more rights than they realize, and I help them navigate that issue. So I think it's really like hiring hiring professionals with the right background. I'm not going to say I'm going to tell you anything about family law. I wouldn't even dare to tell you anything about family law because that's not my expertise. But like we've been doing trademark, copyright, and corporate law for many years, and that's where we really have been able to help a lot of our clients.
Yeah, 100%. So when it comes to protecting IP, it sounds like your idea is maybe even protect it before somebody's generating a lot of revenue, because maybe at that point it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, for example, like with trademarks, we do a lot of trademark work here, enforcement protection. So like with trademarks, you can file something called an intent to use trademark. So that's even when you're not even using it yet, but yet you have an intent to commercialize in the future. So we can actually file an intent to use application, which kind of saves your spot on the USPTO trademark registrar. So now if anyone were to file a mark, even if they're using it after you had your intent to use mark, you still have rights over that person. So I would say if you have a big brand, like we work a lot of cosmetics brands, and cosmetics, obviously brand is so important with cosmetics. With skincare, all these different areas, and not easy to find good trademarks. So one thing what we do is we do kind of an exhaustive, comprehensive name clearance search before you even file the trademark. Because what people don't realize, like, oh, they find a name and they fall in love with it. But unfortunately, I had to be the bearer of bad news for one of my clients who was building this global trademark skincare brand. She's a surgeon, really planning on investing a lot in this. And I told her, unfortunately, the name she chose, there's going to be problems. And she's better off choosing a slightly different name than trying to push this one forward, because the amount of money she's going to spend in legal fees trying to get this pushed forward, even if we win those arguments, and there's no guarantee that we would, it's going to be detrimental to her business. So that's the business strategy. Also, we provide our clients, not just, oh yeah, this is good or bad, or this will make it won't, but like, what's the broader goal of this? Where do you see your business going, and how do you want to use your mark? Because then we also discussed global protection, because not only do we want to look at the US, but okay, she wants to build this, make this a global brand. And what people don't realize sometimes is that like in trademark law, you have to file trademarks in every country. You can't just have a global trademark. So we have to go through and see, okay, what are the right countries we want to use? Do we want to file something called using WIPO, which is like an international system, which has about like 100 countries, or do we want to go to each country separately, where we work with local counsel in each of those countries to file those trademarks? So those are different questions that need to be answered and looked at, but like also taken care of early on, because you're probably not surprised, but like the moment you launch a brand in the US, China, India, other places are watching, and they're going to file those marks there very quickly. And now you're in a tough spot. I know Apple ran into these problems in China. I mean, without a doubt, you will have problems in those other countries if you start building a brand that's getting any kind of notoriety here, because someone's waiting for them to file a trademark there, so they can charge you a lot of money to use that mark. So I would say if you're planning on building a big business, a global business, think about filing early, filing soon, doing a clearance, but also then looking at the global opportunities, the global implications of your mark, and where you want to file for that mark in other countries where you plan to expand, because you need to act quickly in those countries as well, because those are, here I said, you can file intent to use, but you still have to show use in commerce. There, it's just first to file. Whoever's the first to file a mark, no matter what, no matter use or not, you get rights. So there's slightly different paradigms as well in terms of trademark law in those other countries.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to go worldwide, is there a benefit? I mean, it sounds like the benefit to registering with, I think you said WIPO, right?
Yeah, WIPO. Yeah, exactly.
So registering with WIPO could be, it's a one shot, you get it in all these different countries. But the flip side could be that if it's registered in any one of those countries, you might not get WIPO registration? Is that kind of the cost benefit analysis?
Yeah, there's a few issues. Like, so the reason why oftentimes we don't go through WIPO is that also if someone wants to challenge your mark, it's much easier for them to challenge it like centrally with through WIPO as opposed to each and every country. So like if someone would try to challenge it in specific countries, they have to go to that country, hire a lawyer there and challenge it. And with WIPO, they can they can challenge it through that central body. And then if you have a problem with it somewhere, or let's say even your U.S. mark is challenged and something happens to it, uh, that could jeopardize your WIPO mark because your WIPO mark was based on your US mark. So that's why we're always a little bit hesitant to file using WIPO, though you can save some money and there's some fees you could save. There is a cost benefit there, and that's why we usually most big brands, most companies will work with local counsel just directly for the filings. But that doesn't mean that doesn't say that it's always bad. But a lot of times we will work directly with local counsel in each country.
Yeah. Okay. And so, in terms of entrepreneurship and life, what's some of the best advice you've received, whether it's in entrepreneurship or life, that you wish you had known earlier, or that you think would be really helpful for listeners?
Some of the best advice. I feel like some of the best advice is really no one knows what they're doing. Like in entrepreneurship, it's everyone is very good at faking it a lot of times, and um and everything. Like there's a great book which I've not read, but I love the title, called Everything is Figureoutable, by this, I think, Marie Farello. And I should read it actually, but I love the idea. I love the premise and I do believe it's true. Everything is figure outable. Even if you make mistakes in entrepreneurship, usually nothing is fatal. Nothing is fatal that you can't address or fix. And you even know in law, right? You get a lawsuit. People get lawsuits, and the first time you see a lawsuit, it's very scary, right, for anyone to get hit with a lawsuit. But as a lawyer, you litigate every day, and you realize, what, like everything can be figured out. Like we can maybe find a settlement. We can find some way to negotiate this. If we have to enforce someone's rights, we help them do. You help them do that. Similarly, like with us, if there's a dispute or if there's some issue that arises, it can all be figured out. It's understanding. Okay, we're all humans, and we're all trying to, like, everyone has their own interests, and okay, I'm trying to figure out what this other person wants, and how do we find some common ground there. So I would say, like, yeah, everything is figure outable in entrepreneurship, and then also, like, to believe, like, that's kind of cheesy, but like to believe more in yourself. Like it's easy to doubt yourself as an entrepreneur too. It's easy to doubt what you're doing, especially when you're doing something different and something not, you're not following the kind of the beaten path. I'll give example is, when I first went out on my own again, like kind of launching my firm. It was like early years of Yelp, and no lawyers were really on Yelp, and I had a shared this office suite with two other lawyers, brilliant guys, really really nice guys. We got along super well. They went to better law schools than me, objectively probably smarter than me, and I said, I'm going to put myself on Yelp and see what happens there. They're like, "Ah, man, don't do it. You're going to get a bad review, then you're screwed." I said, you know what? I'm already kind of screwed. Let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens. Because I wasn't really busy. I had way too much free time on my hands. I wasn't as busy as I wanted to be, so I put myself on Yelp. I just created a page. Just Carbon Law Group page, or maybe at that point it was actually Law Office of Pankaj Raval. And let's see, what happens. And just lo and behold, a day later, I guess I get a call, and it was a $1,000 client. I mean, without doing anything. And I was like, okay, this is something. So I started saying, okay, I reached out to all my friends, all the people that had helped in the last, month or two. And I said, hey, if you appreciated this, please, leave me a review. It'll really help me get, find more clients. People started putting reviews on Yelp, and all of a sudden I was like, had the most reviews out of any kind of business lawyer in the area, and it started just bringing tons of business. Like, and back in the day, unfortunately now I think Yelp has filed a lawsuit against Google, but at that point the SEO of Yelp was insane. Like it it would always show like top one or two result whenever you search anything in Google. Yelp would come up. You click on Yelp, and then I would be top because I would be the top business lawyer, in that search. So people, it's like, don't underestimate yourself. Don't underestimate, trying things, trying and failing, right? I think it's a cliche in the tech world, like fail faster, but really, I find myself when I'm not progressing as much, when I'm not, my business is not growing, is when I'm fearful. It's when I'm stuck in like fear. I'm stuck in like, worry or doubt that this is a good idea, but really, like, test it all. Like, test. It's all about testing, and then getting feedback. Test and feedback. That's entrepreneurship. That's business. Don't just like sit in your head thinking, or analyzing. Get out there, test things, try things. Yes, you may lose some money, but you got to do it, right? I mean, I know you got a lot of good stories about this. I know you've invested a lot in your business and invested a lot in growth. I love to hear your thoughts on what is the best thing you've ever heard, and some examples.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you in terms of confidence in yourself, the willingness to be able to potentially fail, I think is important. But I think it's important because I've known you for like over 10 years now, and I know how you mean it, but I want to make sure that the listeners understand it, because in terms of fail faster or everything's figure outable, that still requires a high level of dedication and commitment. This is not, to go back to something earlier you had said, is this is not about showing up halfway. This is about showing up completely, putting in the complete time, the complete effort. And then if for some reason it doesn't work out, then that's different. But the reality is, frankly, I think the majority of people don't put in that kind of time and commitment because it's hard, it's uncomfortable. And we live in a society these days where things are extremely comfortable.
Yeah.
Everything from, for the vast majority of us, especially if somebody's listening or watching this podcast, things are pretty comfortable, relatively speaking, compared to human history. And I think that breeds a certain level of satisfaction, a certain level of playing it safe, a certain level of not being willing to risk more for fear that you might lose something or you might look bad. And I think it says a decent amount for somebody to say, to the average, the biggest public fear on average is public speaking. So think about what kind of society or country or world we live in if that's the biggest fear. I don't know of a single person who's died from public speaking. And yet that's the biggest fear. And it totally makes sense that people are terrified of being embarrassed or going on a stage or giving a speech or whatever, and being very terrified about it. I remember as a baby lawyer, I had not planned on becoming a litigator, but I found that once I started doing it, that I kind of liked it, but it still terrified me every single time, whether I was getting up to even give a 30-second pitch at like a meeting, like a BNI or a provisors of who I am and what I do. I would rehearse the night before and I would rehearse the morning of. And I still remember my heart beating in my chest and being very nervous. So the first time I went into court, and I didn't really know what I was supposed to do. So I just got the back of the line and watched what everybody else did, of like, where am I supposed to check in? What am I supposed to exactly say? And so I think there's a big part of figuring things out, like you said, but taking cues from the environment and being willing and confident, able enough to be able to trust yourself that you'll eventually figure it out. So I think my advice to everybody would be, look, truly commit, truly commit, because with the resources that we have access to these days, certainly if you're listening to or watching this podcast, the resources at your disposal are immense. Literally, the vast of human knowledge in history is at your fingertips. That's an incredible time to be alive. And so I would just encourage everybody to embrace the opportunities despite all the negativity in the media and all the negative things we hear about on a daily basis, which certainly there are a lot of, I think that there's frankly far, far more opportunities that people can take advantage of. And if you just pay attention and look around, you'll find them because they are immense.
I agree. Yeah, no, I would say you brought up like a really good point about, I think, the work. I think you made a really good point about just the importance of putting in the work, because you're right. Like, I think you and I both get along too, because like, we both value hard work. We both put in the effort. Like, we know that, I think we're both, very, very positive, optimistic people, but we know we're not naive to think that, oh, it's going to happen because we're positive, optimistic. I always like, impressed with, you getting up at 5 a.m. working, walking and like, exercising. And like, I try to wake up early and work out too. And it keeps you like sane, right? Like for me, I have to exercise almost every day. Otherwise, the stress can get to you, right? Like there's a lot of stress in life and family, and we got kids. So, but I think taking care of yourself is so important too. And that's where like mindfulness and things like that come in. But like, yeah, you're right. Like putting in the work and like, and pushing yourself further, and having a good, like having resources around you that'll also help you push yourself further, right? I think you and I invested in, continually invest in learning and coaching and things like that. And I think that's also why, we've been able to like grow our firms, is that, we're not just complacent here hoping for things to get better, but we are really pushing ourselves to like, how can we get better? How can we learn from others and each other, right? Like having a good group of people around you to continue to like bounce ideas off of, and creating that kind of mastermind that, that we have as well. So I would say anyone listening, find your people, and then, and the people who don't serve, who do not make you be better, or who not help you get better, like let them go. Like you have to be really, really persistent and intentional about the people around you, and who you want to grow with. And if those people are not helping you, then let them go and find the right people, and those people will show up as you continue to like do the work.
Yes. Yeah. And that includes whether it's friends, whether it's professionals on your team. The reality is you might outgrow one or both. And the reality is when you feel that, you'll know, you'll sense it, and you'll feel like something is off and it's time to make a change. And a lot of times we want to stick to what's familiar, because what's unknown can be scary, because by definition it's unknown. It could be worse than what you've got. But those trade-offs, at least in my own life, personal and professional, have been phenomenal and fantastic the vast majority of the time. So on average, it's almost always been an upgrade and a benefit. So, Pankaj, if people want to find out more about you or your firm, where can they find out more about you or your firm?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. If you just if you search Pankaj Raval, Pankaj, last name is Raval on LinkedIn, it's a good place to find me. Also, our website is carbonlg.com. On Instagram, it's at carbonlg. On TikTok, I'm at virtualgc. I think also my name too on TikTok will show up. And then also, yeah, we have like a link tree. We have a YouTube channel with some videos that talk about forming LLCs, different elements of forming a business. That's Pankaj Raval, business lawyer and attorney, and also there's Carbon Law Group on YouTube. So should be pretty easy to get in touch if you ever want to get in touch, or if you have any questions. Yeah, we do focus mainly on transactional and IP work, and would love to help, love to chat about getting your business started.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Pankaj, thank you so much for joining and sharing some of your worldly wisdom with us. And
pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the listeners, thank you all so much for joining and tuning in today. If you're not already, please make sure you like and subscribe so you know when the next episode is coming out. Thanks for joining.